Hey there, it's Patrick Lovell, Truth Bomb riffing the con. It's day two of the Trump hush money trial, and I think my 492nd Truth Bomb riff. And over the course of about 2 years, or over 2 years, I guess. I don't know exactly when I started. I'm kind of losing time trying to connect with tens of millions of people. But I will say that in that time period, we have just surpassed 1,000 subscribers. If I had an editor and if I had special effects, you would see bing, 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 bing. Kind of a cool threshold, but monumentally ridiculous considering the information that I'm sharing to the world. And what I'm attempting to do is, as I frequently have mentioned, like climbing to the top of Mount Everest backwards, pushing a boulder, a 1-ton boulder up, without shoes on. And am I nearing the top? I don't know. But if I had tens of millions of people helping me push this thing and we push it over, the peak and it goes on the other side, we'd create this avalanche like a giant bowling ball that would wipe out the corruption that's destroying everything else. And that's what these truth bombs are all about. And if you're new to this and the first time checking this out, and by the way, I've had a large increase in followers on X, but I'll add also, I think I'm up to, I don't know what the number is, but it's like 3,670 something maybe, or 50. I don't know. It kind of fluctuates because a lot of fake accounts and what I call sex bots. But yeah, if I had as many numbers of beautiful women as I do beautiful women that follow me on X, I'd be a happy camper. But of course, we know that's not what's happening. So I have to get to millions of people. And I'm thinking to myself, the objective is like, look, man, it took me 2 years to get to 1,000 subscribers. Can I get to 10,000 by the end of May? Because if I can get to 10,000, I have people listening to me. And now what I've been posting all over X is that if I had 10 million followers, we'd be halfway to rebooting the American dream and redeeming the American dream and destroying all of the bastards that hide in the shadows that are completely puppeteering this insane racketeering effort that unfortunately millions of you still don't understand. Now, to start things off, I'm a producer. I produced an unbelievably important television series that we have now made available and have for some time for free because all the American people buy our lies. But it's absolutely critical that you understand this information, because if you understood this information, you'd quite frankly be like I am when you're looking at this Trump hush money trial and thinking to yourself, you've got to be kidding me. But you can find it at www.thecon.tv. I wish it was on YouTube. Unfortunately, I wasn't in control of that decision, but all you have to do is fill up a little bit of information. Please don't be paranoid by that. It's worth it. I promise you, we spent millions upon millions of dollars to get a truth that is now up to $71 trillion. And that is incredibly conservative, all things considered. So, yeah, the impossibility is at hand, right? But I think the place to start, and what has been really beguiling to me, and again, if you understood my work, you'd understand why I feel this way, and you would too. But let's just start with the Trump hush money payments trial, which is about what? It's about the fabrication or falsification of business records that have led to 34 indictments that are felonies, that if Trump got convicted of any of them, I mean, each one serves a penalty of about 4 years. But as we saw this morning in Judge Merchan's situation, given the gag order and all the things that are happening in this show trial, which may be the only criminal trial that we get to see that the government, you know, delivers for the American people, considering everything that Trump has done and what's on, being presented to us, given all of the corruption in our courts, which is another thing that I'll address, and is probably the one of the three pillars of this three-legged stool madness, of which I continue to reveal to you. But one of the most important things in this trial so far, for me, has been this revelation of the so-called notion of catch and kill, starring none other, and you can't make these names up. I wish, I was surrounded by a bunch of writers that created Batman and Gotham and all the rest of it and just, see their faces if they saw this whole thing unfold and exactly understood what was going on. And I'm talking about the writers from the comic books in the 20s and the 30s, in their whole corruption in Gotham, which of course came from somewhere. And so the more things change, the more they stay the same. But here you have this guy who was the CEO of the National Enquirer named David Pecker, who is being questioned and has for 2 days, the last 2 days, about what he did in context to what's known as catch and kill, which is something that the National Enquirer was involved with Trump, and I'm sure others, but obviously we're just looking into Trump at this time, where they could intercept stories that could be detrimental to Donald Trump's run for the 2016 election and make payoffs to people to make sure that these didn't go public. And what we're looking at are things that took place literally back in 2006 and 2007. And I think that's important for you to understand and remember, considering everything that I'm laying on you and all of my work through my 491 truth bombs and my work at the con at www.thecon.tv, which is a 5-hour mini series. And it was only one half of the information I have that led to a podcast I did called The New Untouchables that you can find by just doing a Google search, which is another 19 hours of information. And by the way, in one of my Truth Bomb riffs that's on Patrick Little, Truth Bombs the Con, you can go to the menu header and you can go to, God, I can't think of the pull down menu. Is it events? Anyway, it was like we did like an 11-hour sort of Mr. Smith goes to Washington situation where people have gone to the Federal Reserve. Well, I brought in experts to talk about all of the information I have. And so that's another deep dive revelation into what nobody understands, because mainstream media and its billions of dollars of resources and apparatuses want to go back to something that took place in 2006-7 in terms of the relationship with Stephanie Clifford and Donald Trump, while Melania was or just had given birth to their son, Barron, whose name again is right up there with Pecker. And ultimately, he has this affair, what we call a porn star, and I still haven't seen any of the work that Stormy's done. I keep thinking maybe I should, but I'm just not really that motivated. And the long and the short of it is that she had information about the affair that she was going to go public with, and David Pecker had this catch and kill apparatus where they paid her off, and they demonstrated in the last, I think, 2 hours that the standard procedure was something like $15,000, and that Pecker had to I have to do this little segue real quick. Yesterday, I happened to catch one of these pundits like Jake Tapper at CNN, who they're providing literally play-by-play commentary like we're watching a basketball game, even though cameras can't be allowed into the court, where they've got somebody deciphering everything that's going on. And he was talking to one of his colleagues, I believe her name was Karen, and you can't really make that up either. She was a white, really attractive woman whose name was Karen. and he asked what was the sort of projection of Mr. Pecker's demeanor, and I, in my mind, just filled in the blanks like almost like a cartoon caption, as if Karen had said this herself. Well, he was stiff and erect. That's how absurd some of this is. But yet it's not funny, because literally, like I said, this could be the only criminal trial that we get to see of this absolute criminal freaking idiot who at best is a D- criminal con artist in his own right, who's been getting away with it for over 4 decades. If you go back to Patrick Little, Truth Bombs the Con, and you look at, I think, Truth Bomb Riff, episode 488, and again, I'm on 492, so it's just right there at the very beginning of the menu, that you'll see David K. Johnston, the country's literally foremost expert on all things Donald Trump going back to the 80s. And my colleague, really can't call him my colleague, my mentor, a guy that basically showed me how the world works in terms of corruption that is monumentally larger than what we're seeing in this particular setting. But they discussed the 4 decades of Donald Trump and what he's gotten away with and how and what it all means and that sort of thing. But it's just absurd to think that, given that Donald Trump was I believe at all times a wag the dog guy. I don't think he actually engineered January 6th. He's not that smart or patient. The only thing that I think Donald Trump brought to the January 6th sort of engineering scheme was his probably concept that he learned during the 2008 great financial crisis, which is what it is that I'm revealing to you and why all of this stuff is so monumentally insane. I bet Donald Trump, because of Trump University, and for anybody who knows anything about Trump University, knows that Donald Trump, that's the only fine that ever paid for being guilty of fraud and a civil penalty of $25 million because of all sorts of lies and deceptive acts and practices, but including documentation fraud. Like I just said, this entire case regarding Trump's hush money payments is about the falsification of business records to cover up hush money payments that they're going to lay out in this case was electioneering fraud, election fraud, which again is almost monumentally asinine and insane when you consider that Citizens United enables dark money forces that could have easily made payments to Stormy Daniels and nobody would have been the wiser. But because Trump is absurdly cheap, and maybe because he wasn't as rich as we thought he was, but and obviously that much is apparent. But the point, the prescient point, is that whether it is in Judge Engoron's civil fraud conviction of Trump, Letitia James last week, and all of the fraudulent behavior that Mr. Wonderful from Canada, Kevin O'Leary, said everybody does it, was to hyperinflate assets, and so or all sorts of machinations of lying, thieving, deceiving, and cheating on business records through business falsification or falsification of business records, which is a felony. And he did it throughout his entire career and everything that he did and more. Again, I remind you to go check out this interview that I did with David K. Johnson and William K. Black, which is extraordinary. And there's going to be more to come on that. But the magnitude of this notion of catch and kill. People, the reason why you haven't heard of Patrick Lowell, considering the information that I'm providing to you, is I have reason to believe that BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, the most powerful company in the world, and basically an extension and a cohesion, I guess if you want to call it that, it's kind of wrapped up in the United States government, very similar to what we used to call government Sachs, i.e. Goldman Sachs, which still is. But BlackRock took over that role for a bunch of reasons that I've laid out many times before, but primarily to kind of take the heat off of Goldman Sachs. And as a result, they were point on basically recreating the global economy. We just rebooted, and this is part of the information that I'll wait to kind of provide my closing statement, once I try to get through a couple of these items first, though. But the long and the short of it is, so here we're looking at this trial that's got all of the resources of mainstream media, and of course, all of the people in independent media, a lot of them are reacting to this type of stuff. But it's got a lot of our focus. I'd say it takes up most of the oxygen in the room when there's a lot of things going on in the world. And it's about situations that took place in 2006 that led to a scheme in 2014-15 that led to the 2016 election that Donald Trump won, and the government, the state of New York, not the federal government, the state of New York, brought the case courageously. And I commend Alvin Bragg, the district attorney of the Southern District of Manhattan. But this case was sitting around gathering cobwebs for a long time. The former DA of Manhattan, this guy Cyrus Vance, I believe his name was, he didn't want to bring this case to trial. Again, absolutely absurd, given what we're in the midst of, that this stuff could have been dealt with a long time ago. But there was a lot of gambling probably in terms of PR and everything else. But I look at Donald Trump when I hear all of these, revelations of who he is and what he is and what he's done. None of it surprises me. The only thing that surprises me is to think back to 15, 20 years ago when I was walking through supermarkets and, I might have been, I don't know, high or drunk late night, getting some beer to go back to my house to kind of chill out after a big night out on the town. And I'd see something like, some, I don't know, cover of the National Enquirer and laugh with my friends. And David Pecker was on the stand saying yesterday that the only thing that mattered was the cover of National Enquirer. And Rachel Maddow made the argument last night. And again, her and her all-star team and Lawrence O'Donnell and their high-paid, charismatic, very polished, very scripted, very detailed, you know, highly, highly paid with incredible resources are hyper-focusing on, you know, what really amounts to a show trial that's a joke. It's a joke that we're in the situation, but the mighty superpower that the United States once was has been reduced to the National Enquirer, and they're catch and kill to help Donald Trump get elected president. I mean, it's absurd when you look through the rearview mirror of the last, well, let's just talk at 9 years, right? Because of Trump's 5,000 lies, of plus of his transparent corruption with the likes of Saudi Arabia and Putin, and doing it transparently right in front of our face, and all things his relationship with Deutsche Bank. And I remind you, as all of these hugely funded media apparatuses are focusing all of their attention on this scenario, during the Judge Engeron and Letitia James, the New York Attorney General that brought the civil fraud violation that was once somewhere in the $454 million range, that's been reduced to $175 million, that Trump apparently has the money. And that's a whole nother scenario that's unfolding, even though the billionaire out of LA who specialized in subprime loans in the auto market apparently didn't really have the money. And, you know, that's another just revelation of all things that leads us back to the business fabrication, or the falsification of business records, which is what you see in everything that Donald Trump's done through the civil fraud trial and his business practices. But the media didn't know how to ask the right questions, particularly, or they chose not to, because again, like the catch and kill of BlackRock, of my story, The Con, at www.thecon.tv, that we made for free because all the American people are buy our lies, that I have to get to tens of millions of people so that they suddenly turn on the light in their brain and they go, holy shit, what Patrick Lovell has been telling us this whole time is the truth. I've been on my knees, blindfolded with my mouth open, and they're pissing in my mouth telling me it's rain. Honestly, that's the situation for tens of millions of you. But going back to, you know, Pecker and this trial of hush money payments, and most notably the falsification of business records, you see that in every case the government is demonstrating, whether it's in the Fonnie Willis RICO case in Fulton County, Georgia, and all of the racketeering that went into literally stealing the Electoral College through documentation fabrication, which is, you know, again, falsification of records. And then, of course, all things in his what's it called? Business practices that go out forever. And again, like I emphasized a minute ago, the media doesn't know how to ask the questions. Why were the banks willing to lend to Donald Trump? But in this specific case, why was Deutsche Bank willing to lend to Donald Trump? We got to understand that Deutsche Bank was one of the top criminal syndicates in the world. Yeah, they're a German bank. They've been involved with all sorts of crazy stuff, including racketeering and pump and dump schemes going back to the railroads and the robber barons in the United States back in the 1800s. But yeah, they've been playing Wall Street's game for a long time, not to be confused with Nazis, even though they certainly were involved with funding Nazis. But like all financiers, they'll go wherever the money goes. And Deutsche Bank was famously depicted in Brad Pitt's The Big Short, written by Adam McKay, right? It was Deutsche Bank that was putting all of the House of Cards together in what we call the collateralized debt obligations and collateralized debt default swaps, that the protagonist that was modeled on an investor, a hedge fund investor, a guy by the name of Michael Burry, that shorted the market. But why did he short the market? Well, in The Big Short, it was because of business fabrication going into liar's lens, but they didn't even go into anything remotely close to what your buddy Patrick Lovell has. So the sum total of everything that the United States government is demonstrating that Donald Trump is guilty of, and therefore cannot become the president of the United States, outside of it all, you know, leading to this Armageddon of fascism, which, you know, I put Donald Trump like he's a D- fraudster. He's a D- dictator. He's not even Mussolini. And do you know what, you know, the outcome of Mussolini was? Donald Trump is a joke, which means that all of MAGA is a joke. But MAGA is even worse than that, because, I mean, literally, MAGA, what, believes in religion. Donald Trump is selling Bibles last week after he's on trial for paying hush money payments to a porn star. Yeah, I guess is Jesus okay with that flaw? But you're buying it alongside the sneakers. I mean, Donald Trump is the gift of satire that keeps on giving. You know, he made the cover of Mad Magazine a number of times. We've made fun of him on, SNL forever, but nobody comes close to the level of audacity that Donald Trump has done for now for decades plus without being taken down. And here we are, where the time is running out of the hourglass in mainstream media and the Democratic Party, particularly, is like Donald Trump cannot be president. This is absolutely an abomination. This is insane. We're going to reveal that Donald Trump defrauded the United States using deceptive acts and practices and business, falsification of business records, documentation fabrication, and racketeering. And you cannot put the Joker. And have you ever seen that picture online of Donald Trump looking like the Joker from Batman? Yeah, he does. And I'm not talking about, what's his name? Phoenix, who did the glorious Joker a couple of years ago. No, I'm talking about the old Joker who looked like a clown alongside Penguin and all the rest of it. Yeah, that's who Donald Trump is in Gotham. And it's going to go from bad to worse, but it's just absolutely insane. Into context of people, what I'm trying desperately to get you to understand. In the case of the business falsification records, what I reveal to you in my work, The Con, is literally tens of millions of documentation fraud that were all felonies. There were tens of millions of felonies in the run up to the 2008 great financial crisis. And then there were tens of millions of documentation fraud and business fabrication in the courts that judges, thousands upon thousands of judges, enabled and allowed, because they all work for this financial corruption. Because Wall Street, our financial system made up of too big to fail banks, which we call systemically important financial institutions, which includes hedge funds and private equity and asset managers and high wealth fund managers. These guys all have the seat at the apparatus, and they all depend on the Federal Reserve. But because we provided, the Department of Justice did not bring the cases against the CEOs of Wall Street, similarly to what we're seeing the government demonstrate on behalf of Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump, again, is a tiny, tiny player in context of what I'm saying. However, Eric Holder's Department of Justice literally said everything that I'm telling you, as did the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission. I go a lot further than both, quite frankly, but they told you about 90% of what I'm telling you and reveal, and they said the whole thing was a criminal racket, but it led to $250 billion in fines for the too big to fail banks. But think about that in context to Judge Egeron, talking about reducing the $454 million bond so that, Trump starts losing all of his properties, those things that actually make Trump what he is in all of our minds, because The Apprentice and his decades-long involvement with real estate in Manhattan, being a player and so on and so forth, only to reveal what he and Kevin O'Leary said everybody's doing. Yeah. And why are they doing it? Well, that's revealed to you in The Con. It's also revealed to you in my work, The Untouchables, and it's revealed to you throughout 491 truth bombs in The Con. But what does all lead to? It leads to this reflection that Donald Trump is the ultimate mirror of everything that's going on, except the government, with its $90 billion a year apparatus between the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigations and the Securities and Exchange Commission and the AGs around the country, weren't able to deliver to you what I was able to do. And their budget was, like I said, north of $90 billion. Patrick Lovell was able to figure it all out and put it on camera with all the facts. We crossed our T's and dotted our I's to where we were able to do it for approximately $4.5 million to get you to what is now, and this is a conservative number, the $71 trillion revelation. Because what happened in the aftermath of the 2008 great financial crisis was that the Federal Reserve illegally pumped $33 trillion to Wall Street to save them for gutting this country through lies and deceptive acts and practices, using racketeering to blow up the fucking world. It's insane. But instead of us actually holding them accountable, we hid the flag. If you remember what that game is, catch and kill. But catch and kill in the media was BlackRock, who were the ones administrating this $33 trillion in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, placed in that position because I'm a little bit cloudy on the whole thing, but I can tell you that Larry Fink, and you can't make up that name either, right? Going back to Gotham, Larry Fink was the guy who cleaned up the S&L crisis in the early 90s. Okay, wow, that's a revelation. But then he gets to clean up, by the way, that was called the Resolution Trust. But then he gets to basically be the CEO of BlackRock to clean up the world, to pick winners and losers and everything that reveals. You know, what the mainstream media is trying to tell you, that this is a war for the soul of democracy. We have to save democracy. Democracy was betrayed and destroyed a long time ago. I'm not quite sure we've ever been a democracy because of the Electoral College, but it was certainly a hell of a lot, more responsible to the American people than it has been the last 15 years. I can assure you that. And we used to actually have business news that was alongside a lot of coverage in media, but it is no longer, because they've hyperinflated on the corruption of one guy. They've got hundreds of billions of dollars of resources. And I think this is a crucial point to remind you of as well. Last year, both Rachel Maddow, or it might have been 2 years ago, Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson were in the crosshairs of a suit based on them, basically purporting lies on their platforms. And what their attorneys, circle the wagons, their corporate attorneys for their different divisions at Fox and MSNBC, in this particular case, said, no, there's no expectation for anyone to believe the people that are the anchors of these networks. They're just simply entertainment. Yeah, that's a loft. That's what they did. But meanwhile, they're there every night as if they're legit. And obviously they work under a whole lot of other, circumstances that aren't quite the same as what happens in a court, which is why it is important to bring all of these things to the head in terms of Donald Trump. But again, let's put it in perspective. Donald Trump lied over 5,000 times. He was transparently corrupt. He basically sold his soul, to MBS and Putin, and he's not the only one. And as it relates to Saudi, in fact, our entire system does. But that's another point. And Putin, okay, so that's the situation. But at the same time, that sells us all down the river. We don't have a vision. I mean, we're not a democracy, my friends. I've said this a million times in my truth bombs as well, but it bears repeating because I am picking up some momentum. We're not a democracy because of the work that I have revealed. It's exactly this. We're a corporate fascist state that's undergirded by a criminal syndicate. It's the mafia, okay? That is completely guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States, which are these bailouts. I just mentioned $33 trillion in 2009. There was an additional 16 trillion up to about 2016 in what we call quantitative easing. And I'm more than happy to debate any economist out there that wants to go down that path of, oh yeah, no, that's not exactly what quantitative easing was for. And there's a difference between monetary policy and fiscal policy. No, I can hold my own against any PhD economist on the country because of the evidence that I have. Because theories and models don't mean anything in the real world, I can tell you that. And then also the magnitude of where am I going with the next point? Oh, I was rattling off all of the different trillions of dollars and the different batches that took place. And then what we had was another monumental infusion of capital into Wall Street and the too big to fail apparatuses and the SIFI banks around the world, which includes Japan, SoftBank in Japan, which apparently dominoed a feeding frenzy in the repo markets in 2019, which was saved by the Fed to the tune of 22 trillion. So that's $71 trillion there. Add it up. 33 trillion for the aftermath of the 2008 great financial crisis. By the way, all of it illegal, provided by Federal Reserve Act 13.3, because the collateral was worth zero. And the guy who put the whole deal together was the partner at Sullivan and Cromwell, a guy by the name of Raj Cohen, who admitted so much that I have the tape to, in front of the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission because they didn't know how deep the collateralized loan obligations went. And that's why the number was so spectacular, which means that all of that was illegal. And that happened because of 98 meetings at the Federal Reserve that took place behind closed doors, where the heads of our financial system, John Paulson or Hank Paulson at the time, was our Treasury Secretary, who came out of Goldman Sachs to become the Treasury Secretary under George Bush, who was deeply involved with mortgage-backed securities. By the way, I heard Patrick Boyle yesterday remind everybody that MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia, reminds us of mortgage-backed securities. Wow, that's an interesting correlation. I can tell you Saudi has a lot of ownership of real estate in the United States, but that's another story. And then ultimately, like I said, 33 trillion plus 16 trillion. So that's 49 trillion plus 22 trillion to 72 trillion on the low end. And that's before COVID. And that's before last year's bank runs, which were 3 of the 4 largest bankruptcies in the history of the United States, which were regional banks, which are up to their eyeballs in commercial loan products that follow the same trajectory of the mortgage-backed securities and the subprime and the liar's loans, because there were tens of millions of documents that set this whole thing up that were, again, falsification of business records, because it's all guaranteed, because all the top level white collar executives and CEOs learned a long time ago exactly what Donald Trump learned. Just fucking lie in your documents and challenge the system to stop you. Have the system stopped Donald Trump with over 4 decades of fraud, particularly going into Manhattan real estate and then ultimately into Jersey, in his Taj Mahal and all the rest of it. Yeah, that was part of the early versions of what we call the control fraud and the savings and loan crisis. So I could go on for another 100 hours, but I'm gonna just draw it to a close. And please look into my eyes, understand what I'm telling you. Just like we saw this morning, if Judge Merchan cannot enforce a gag order against Donald Trump, what is the credibility of the law? Now, I understand, they don't want to bother the Secret Service and throw him in jail and all of the stuff because it's going to derail the trial, and it could create problems, and the media doesn't want that and that sort of thing, and they're in control with the guys that are puppeteering this whole thing, which are quite frankly the billionaires behind the scenes that use, they spend billions to loot trillions. That's been our business model for the last 13 years. It truly has been. And that is concurrent to the journey that I've been on. And I don't know how much further I can go, because I've got to bring this to a head. I don't know which direction this river goes, but I need you to understand that I have the answers that can take it all down. I have connections to the good guys within the system that are the experts in law and accounting and everything else that could, lay this out to the American people, as I already have, but in a way that could actually, if we had momentum in Congress, which means we'd have to have politicians that work of, by, and for the people. But of course, we know they don't. We know that our Supreme Court is corrupt to the gills. And if you don't know that, you're probably MAGA and you're living under a rock. But for anybody who's got a college education, anybody who understands anything about anything, any degree of professionalism, yeah, the Supreme Court is corrupt. Just look at the last, 6 weeks of scenarios where on the one hand, the Supreme Court determined that the state of Colorado couldn't enforce the Constitution Amendment 14th Amendment, Section 3, that's self-executing. And I got that information from Lawrence Tribe, not Lawrence Tribe, the professor emeritus of constitutional law at Harvard University. And it is absolutely to prevent someone involved with an insurrection or betraying the Constitution for running for office, and it's self-executing. The government did a January 6th investigation that shows that all of the things that, and they only got that much of the big picture. And that's another part of this whole thing, because, I guarantee you again, all of these different pathways lead you to billionaires behind the scenes. Think about this guy. Who heard of Harlan Crow, the real estate developer, before it was revealed that this guy's been paying for Clarence Thomas's house and his RV and trips all around the world and first class privileges to basically make Clarence Thomas the first African American and only African American, which is a betrayal to MLK and I Have a Dream, to be so corrupt for the man. And his wife, Jenny Thomas, works for the Koch Enterprises, who were deeply, deeply involved. I'm talking Jenny Thomas with the insurrection. It was a coup d'etat, but they figured they could all get away with it because that's what Wall Street got away with. See, that's what happens when you don't enforce the law. When you make the law, cherry pick it for some people, but it's not, because everybody in mainstream media is going to say, look, Donald Trump is not above the law. Okay, but what about Jamie Dimon? What about Brian Montague? What about, I could go down the list of every CEO of every major financial institution in this country, and you get the drift because nobody's holding them accountable. In fact, I'll give you an idea of what happens with these clowns, okay? Jamie Dimon, who's a 5-time recidivist since 2007, who paid off a woman by the name of Elaine Flashman to go quiet after she was on Rolling Stone's cover after an incredible article by then journalist, because he's no longer a journalist, Matt Taibbi, who was one of the best in the business, laid out that she was the, at that time, $9 billion witness. It turned out to be a $13 billion witness. That, yeah, the management and CEOs and everybody knew that they were selling liars' loans. So they basically got rid of her. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase, as I just mentioned, was a 5-time recidivist after that sort of scenario with insider trading information and racketeering as it related to metals markets. And then all things, quite frankly, Epstein, which hasn't brought to trial outside of a $270 million fine. And he's not the only one. Bank of America just got fined. And then, of course, the hedge fund Apollo Management, and that guy was another one of these billionaires that nobody's ever heard of until some of this stuff, makes its way through some journalists doing their job. A guy by the name of Leon Black, who was involved with Epstein, and I think $187 million in tax payments and that sort of thing, which was another like, what? There is definitely 2 tiers of law. It's probably 3 or 4 or 5 tiers of law, quite frankly. It's all absolute insanity. But what I'm telling you is the ultimate reflection of the most un-American of all things. Look, we live in a post-truth society. We live in a society where we reward the liars with the ultimate in power and deceptive. And look, I started my journey understanding from the great film in the 90s starring Kevin Bacon that literally laid all of this stuff out, fictionally, but it's so true of the human psychology. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. We have got to get tens of millions of people to understand that if you buy that Donald Trump was guilty of getting using business or falsification of business records to be involved with electioneering fraud, which are felonies, and that would prevent you from A, voting for him, or B, him going to jail and not being able to run in the presidential election, which we all know that's not going to happen because they're not even enforcing the gag order at this moment. Who knows what kind of antics are going to happen downstream. But again, Donald Trump is the ultimate ignoramus. He's not even Mussolini, okay, let alone Hitler. Are you freaking kidding me? The United States has been destroyed to such an extent by this corruption that I'm revealing to you that it's even possible that the Republican Party could be so incredibly corrupt and complicit, and that millions of people who support MAGA could literally A, say that they believe in Jesus, and B, they believe in law and order. No, they don't. Not either one of them. What they believe in is the white man having all of the advantages and everybody working for them. That's a shortcut. But that's who they are. That's make America great again. That was the Ku Klux Klan call to action with the neo-Nazis in America back in the 1920s. Where do you think Steve Bannon got all this information from? And Donald Trump, again, is just an opportunist. And yesterday, and I thought this was absolutely hilarious as well, and it happened last night on the Lawrence O'Donnell program where he was talking to Trump's niece, Mary Trump, and they were talking about how, the attorney for Trump, laid out that Donald Trump is a family man in his opening remarks, but yet nobody from Donald Trump's family was there. And then Lawrence O'Donnell had quipped, yeah, even Jeffrey Dahmer's parents showed up for his trial. That's how absurd this is. This is absolutely insane. Not to mention Donald Trump using the podium of the bully pulpit of all media focusing on him as he has the whole time since, former CEO of Viacom, Les Moonves, and former CEO of CNN, Jeff Zucker, had revealed to us, yeah, he's good for ratings. So he plays up the ratings for all of this campaigning, even though he's not campaigning, saying it's all unfair and nothing happened and it's a railroad case by the Democrats. So, and it's all nonsense. It's all absolute pure insanity. But what are our options going into the 2024 election? And why is it so important that I've got to get tens of millions of you to join me, to lock arms with me? And we have to show up in Washington, D.C., and we've got to, make a show of it where millions of Americans understand the truth of what we're dealing with, where we surround the Supreme Court, where we surround Congress, where we surround the Department of Justice, and then we pilgrimage together to the Washington Mall, to where, underneath the gaze of Abraham Lincoln, who once said during the Gettysburg Address, during the Civil War, where again, Americans had to prove to the world that we were about liberty and justice for all, that a nation of, by, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. That's what we have to do, because we're not of, by, and for the people. We're of it, by, and for the corruption. Based on everything I just told you. To remember, Donald Trump literally paid $450,000 in apparently illegal payments to cover up Stormy Daniels telling the National Enquirer that, or anyone else for that matter, that she had an affair with Trump prior to the 2016 election so he could win it. Compare that to $71 trillion. And all of that stuff's public if you know where to look. I know where to look, and I tell you where to look, but the bottom line is, together we'll do it, because I need to lay this out on the American people, because you're probably not going to do it on your own, because it's thick with information. All of this stuff is. That's why I had to spend $4.5 million to work on this for literally the last 6 years in terms of the con. 3 years before that for my first film, which was Prologue, called Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream, because, it's Passover. Okay. And I am Jewish, from a mixed family. I am Jewish. I know what's happening on all of the universities in the Ivy League. And yesterday that was happening, at Columbia and Manhattan and on the West Coast and everything else, and what all of that means in terms of the war between Israel and Hamas. And the word Israel means to struggle, to wrestle with God. But it also means God endures. And I've been struggling with God for a long time, wondering, when is it going to happen that tens of millions of you are going to finally wake up and understand that Patrick Lovell is throwing you the truth, which is our Savior? Because I'm trying to create exodus from corruption to resurrect the American dream. And that's what we do when tens of millions of us come together and we get to the Washington Mall, and I lay out all of this information. But it has to be this symphony. It has to be this orchestration. It has to be tens of millions of you joining me and then bringing this information above the noise of lies, because it's industrial lies. Look, like I said, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, they're all entertainment. Fox just admitted its business practices are just to deceive and a lie. And they paid $787 million because of what was going on with the Dominion voting booths during the insurrection. And that brings me probably to my final points, and I won't spend much time on it. But look, Tucker Carlson was just with Joe Rogan, and I watched it. I sat through the 3 hours, in pockets, but it infuriated me, but some of it was interesting. But I can't stand Tucker Carlson. I've made the proclamation in many of my truth bombs that, hey, Dana White and Joe Rogan, put me in the ring with Tucker Carlson and also Alex Jones, and let's do a pay-per-view, and then I'll provide all the proceeds to the victims of Sandy Hook, because they're not getting paid by Alex Jones, who's on vacation in Hawaii, which is absolutely insane, and being platformed by Elon Musk and all of that stuff. But Tucker Carlson, who I think is a real piece of work, okay? The guy tells just enough truth embedded in a whole bunch of manipulation and lies. And that's his entire deal. And he's learned the algorithms and he's learned everything else as he's gone independent. And he starts to talk about how, we are at an era of it's the battle between good and evil. Yeah, he's right about that. But he's on the evil side, because he talks about how it's the weak people that literally are in government that can be bought by this corruption to betray the United States. And that's not, democracy, like he really believes in democracy from the Christo, nationalist sort of conjecture that he's, been laying out there ever since he got fired from Fox. and ultimately, and lying, by the way, in a sycophanted way. And by the way, I did see people recently referring to what kind of laugh is that Tucker Carlson has. I call it the Chucky laugh. He reminds me of Chucky. You remember that the little Muppet character with the knife, and he just like the guy's a freaking goon. Joe Rogan, Dana White, put me in the ring with him. I'll go bare knuckles, man. If anybody wants to see blood, I would love to fight Tucker Carlson like you have. No idea, and I'll donate the proceeds really to the Clean New Deal, which is what I'm trying to achieve. But ultimately, he's one of these vectors of lies and predation of psychology in your mind by skewing things that we all know and believe and ultimately feel. But most of you are so confused that you can't see the forest for the trees because everybody is lying to you. They're lying to you on X. They're lying to you in mainstream media. The New York Times is lying to you. Yes, Donald Trump was right about fake media. He used it for his own benefit for his entire career. And that's what we've come to. And that's what I'm trying to do to you, to reach inside your head and your heart to compel you to join me to create a tidal wave crusade to purge corruption and the fascism it fuels. I promise you, if you join me in Washington, D.C., and we surround the Supreme Court, Congress, and the Department of Justice, obviously, this is a peaceful protest. I'm not suggesting that it comes anywhere close to January 6th, but we show up in force to the tune of millions, equipped with the truth that I have, and we get to the National Mall and I lay this whole thing out, it's game over for the bad guys. I'll reach into the shadows and I'll bring them into the light and we'll crush the corruption that's corrupting us. Because if you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in dignity and decency and sustainability and most of all integrity, if you join me, it is our destiny to introduce the Clean New Deal, which will give us a new Glass-Steagall, which will separate commercial banking from investment banking, which is the whole problem, which is gambling with other people's money, which is what we understood after the Great Depression through what Ferdinand Pecora, the greatest of our times, put together for the American people. So we ended up with a Glass-Steagall Act to basically create a economy that became the gold standard around the world and made us the superpower that we are, alongside the courage of everybody who fought for our ideals, which has always been an American trait, from the Revolution to the Civil War to World War II and the war against fascism, and of course the Civil Rights Movement. And no, it's never been perfect. It never will be perfect, just like the universe, man. There's the light, there's the photons, there's the Big Bang, and then there's dark matter. Yeah, this is the universal construct, my friends. But you got to want truth and justice and liberty for all above all else. And that's what I am providing to you. And when we do so, and we usher in the Clean New Deal, that is our destiny. Guys, I got to get to at least 10,000 subscribers as soon as possible. You need to be able to provide this information to as many people as you can. Please become a vector, become a trumpeter for the truth. If you're somebody who supports RFK Jr. and you think he's the answer, I encourage you to join me in a discussion about where you make your points about what RFK Jr. is going to do to save us from this duopoly. And we all know that the whole system is corrupt. If you vote for Biden, which if everything happened today, I would vote for Biden out of necessity. Not because I like to, but just like in 2020, it's like this. But at the same time, compared to what? Trump? Trump is like the most asinine abomination this country has ever produced. And that's saying something. I'll tell you, George Bush II was a piece of work, okay? And really led to a lot of the problems that we're in the midst of. But ultimately, Donald Trump is just a joke of monumental proportions, but yet he is the ultimate reflection. I've got to thank him for everything that he has done to reveal to all of you. He's channeling everything I'm saying that legitimizes what it is that I'm telling you. But Biden would protect the upper 10% through BlackRock, because we're of by and for BlackRock. They run the government. It's true. And that's the problem, because typically the top 10%, they're kind of the smartest amongst us. And they benefit from all the stuff that's been going on because of what the Federal Reserve has done illegally, which is provide trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to the financial system, which serves people with assets. It's not to create an equilibrium or a balance. It's to create the new aristocracy. And that's what this is. This is a revolution against tyranny and the misery that it produces. But I can assure you that if I can get into tens of millions of your heads that we spent $71 trillion to the mafiocracy, who've been lying, stealing, deceiving, and cheating and betraying the American people this entire time, which is monumentally larger than Donald Trump. It's not to say that Donald Trump's got to, shouldn't be touched. No, he cannot win the election. I agree with that. But at the same time, if you vote for Biden, you vote for the system that made Trump. If you vote for Trump, you vote for the end of the world. And if you vote for RFK, basically you're voting for Trump. And RFK doesn't even know that Sullivan and Cromwell was in this situation, and he's the guy that's always talking about the CIA. I can assure you, if you join me, we will know exactly what the Federal Reserve did and what the CIA did. You put those two guys together, those guys in the shadows, they're the ones who control everything. They really do. Because the financial system that's rotted to the core, that has been stealing from us every which way to Sunday, through zombie companies in 2016, through liars loans and everything before that, through ultimately, commercial real estate and all the rest. I mean, we've been propping up those who have assets. It's a fictional economy. It's a fictional democracy. I'm going to get that back. Final words. If you join me, we will bulldoze the tyranny that has been bulldozing us for the last 15 years, and we will usher in the renaissance of possibility. And it will start with the $71 trillion that was stolen, because that's the starting point for rebooting in America. Do you know what our GDP is? Do you know what we're paying right now, and with the debt, the national debt, and that's not to be confused with credit card debt for the American people, of which, by the way, are concurrent. They're both $33 trillion. The service on the debt is more than our expenditure for the military, and our military budget exceeds the top 10 countries in the world combined. We got to get done with forever wars. We got to get done with corruption. We've got to recreate the dream. That's what we have to do. Martin Luther King went to the National Mall and professed, "I have a dream." I'm going to do that to redeem the dream. But the only way you can do that is if you've got tens of millions of people that are buying the message, that understand it. Go to www.thecon.tv. Watch for yourself. It's free. If you're tired of buying the lies, watch it. Then check out the new Untouchables. Check out randomly all of my videos on Patrick Global Truth Bombs the Con. But guys, ultimately, you have to understand, we got to unite. We've got to become one. We've got to become a country of, for, and by the people, and we shall not perish from this earth. Because if we don't come together now, we're never going to have another option to do it like this. Everything Trump is showing us is exactly what we're talking about. So my call to action, my friends, rise, roar, revolt. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. It's not rocket science. It's racketeering. I'm Patrick Lovell. I've got the $71 trillion truth. I'm leading the crusade to purge corruption, to get to what we call the clean new deal, and failure is not an option. I'm not really a praying guy. I'm praying that you will share this with everyone you know. I promise you, if we do this in unison, we will break the algorithm. And if my voice gets above the sea of lies with the truth, I'll pull everybody out of this murkiness of this pollution of deception and betrayal, and I will elevate us to where all of the high paid money makers of fraud, all of them. And as much as I like Lawrence O'Donnell, and I love Lawrence O'Donnell, and Rachel Maddow, I like Rachel Maddow, but they never told the story. They're not paid to tell the story. And that's the problem. If you have any questions, reach out to me, ping me. I'll answer anybody. I will get on with anybody. I'll talk to anybody. Don't sit there and just question anymore. What are we going to do? I've got the answers. I've got the pathway to the solution. I know the people who can do this, including myself. And who am I in this whole thing? I'm the Pied Piper, but just call me the producer, because that's what producers do. And oh yeah, by the way, is this the only thing I'm doing? No, just so you know, right now I'm involved with an incredible documentary about getting plastics out of the ocean. I'm also involved with a great film that has some of the biggest stars that exist, based on Boy Scouts and soapbox derby racing. And then I'm also involved with some of the biggest rock and roll stars in a couple of documentaries. I got shit going on, people. I'm giving this to you for free. That cost me my life, quite frankly, everything that matters to me, because in the end, based on Passover, honestly, and this is all what it comes down to in terms of my construct. I had a covenant with the law, liberty, and justice for all. Yeah, for all of you people that think that this is Armageddon or the rapture and all of that shit, and if you understand that the whole concept is to banish wickedness, what have I just been referring to in the last hour or so? It's all wickedness, man. You know, Tucker Carlson says the weakest people succumb to evil. He's one of them, and he's right. Patrick Lovell is not weak. Onwards and upwards.